welcome back to another episode of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, the show where we talk about some of the crazy stupid things that people do in marketing and how, with a reset of our mindsets and who we're listening to in the market, how we might be able to do not crazy or stupid marketing, but really great foundational, meaningful marketing for ourselves and for our business. Today, I'm very excited to have Ash Roy with me. Now, you might have seen that we had this scheduled a while ago, and it has been rescheduled, and we're finally here to talk about building authority. And I'm really excited about this concept because not only because is building authority, yes, it's a marketing concept, but really this is, it could be a thought leader perspective, or there could be a lot of different ways. Maybe you're trying to build authority with your kids. I don't know. But this is the fun part of these conversations is when we look at these things like building authority from a human perspective, then they start to become useful and duplicatable in other areas of our lives, business, personal, all of the things. So if you're new to the show, I am Tracy Borison, the host of the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show, and I am somewhat obsessed with authenticity, which by my definition is doing and saying what you would do or say when you would do or say it. And so I'm going to have fun looking at that and how you can build authority with those types of things. I have many questions for Ash, but also if you have questions for Ash and you are joining us live, please make sure to share those questions in the comments and we will bring them over into the conversation. Equally, if you have experience, knowledge, all of that good stuff in the realm of building authority, and you have insights, perspectives, other things that you would like to share in the comments, please do so. We would love to hear your voice, and it makes the beautiful conversation all that more robust. So please, please share your voice. We want to hear your voice as well as our voices. That's the intro. Just fun fact for everyone. I'm coming off of a client thing that was going on. So I'm resetting my personal experience. So while I do that, let's learn a little bit more about Ash. And Ash, tell us a little bit about yourself and why building authority is something that has become something that is really relevant for you.
Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you for having me on the show. That was an amazing intro. I love the beat at the start, and that music. And I loved what you had to say about there's a lot of noise out there, but, what's your brand going to be about? What's going to be the voice of your brand? And I wanted to apologize for the reschedule and thank you for having me and putting up with me. I was about a minute late today, so I haven't started off with a lot of authenticity, but I'm calling myself out on it, which hopefully will give me some credit. Now, your question was, can you remind me?
Just tell everyone who you are and why building authority is something that is important to you.
Right. So I'm Ash Roy. I'm the founder of ProductiveInsights.com. I kind of stumbled onto building authority, but one of the first places I learned to write after I came to my senses following having completed a CPA and worked in the corporate world and done an MBA and having felt disillusioned with the whole thing, I discovered Brian Clark's website called Copyblogger, and he talked a lot about authority back then, and I think he's since sold it. But I'm a big fan of his work. I still am. And that resonated with me. I think building authority is a great way to generate demand and attract what HubSpot calls inbound leads. Building authority takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of patience, but it's the only long-term strategy that I know works. And I know I'm not alone. In a conversation I had with my friend Seth Godin on the podcast, or Guy Kawasaki, or Neil Patel, they all have been doing this for a long time, and it's not an overnight thing. And there's a lot of BS going around saying, I made $1 million this and $1 million that, and this impression either overtly or covertly implied that you can have overnight success, but it takes 10 years to be an overnight success.
That was one of my favorite Mel Robbins. Was that it took me 10 years to become an overnight success. And these are the things that I think people get that. So I think that people do understand that, and that you build on these things, especially anything that is going to continue to grow and scale, that it wasn't built overnight, that it's not built on a foundation of sand. But at the same time, we're constantly getting thrown, as you so politically correctly called BS, about these things. And so we become overwhelmed by the messaging that this is possible. And we start to be convinced that there's an easy button that we can just press and have overnight success.
Have you heard of the mere exposure effect, Tracy?
No.
It's a term. You can look it up, but essentially it says that the more you're exposed to a certain idea or a brand or whatever the theory is, I don't know how statistically robust this theory is, but apparently the more likely you are to buy from that brand, or I would imagine that extends to ideas and adopting ideas as well. I think there's a couple of other forces at play, if you like, here. I think we are all most human beings are hardwired to minimize or to mitigate pain and prioritize pain mitigation over opportunity maximization. And so when we are presented with a less painful path, even if the frontal cortex and the executive function recognizes that this is BS, the lizard brain, the older brain, has a tendency to want to believe that, and we're all prone to it. I've fallen for it, and I still fall for it unless I'm practicing mindfulness and being aware of, the patterns in my brain. And it's a case of ongoing vigilance, if you like, because our old brain has just got the capacity to override our new brain in most situations.
And this is totally relevant, I see, in the building authority arena, because it starts with you, right? It starts with you and an investment in doing this kind of work. So let's just look at your journey, Ash, your individual journey in this building authority arena. How important was that day-to-day mindset? What do you want to call it? Mindset, personal development, self-awareness. How important are those kind of human skills in creating a good foundation for building authority?
That's a great question. I think they're critical. I think if you don't practice self-awareness, anyone is prone to giving into the least painful option. I mean, that's why we are more likely to reach for sugary products, right? Or a bag of chips instead of a piece of fruit. You got to cut the piece of fruit usually. It's just more work, but almost anything and everything that comes with a quick reward, usually, well, from what I've seen, has a hidden cost.
I think this is a really,
sitting down for long hours a day comes with a cost. Eating too much sugar comes with a cost. I know this from experience. Engaging in hedonistic activities almost always comes with a long-term cost. It seems to be the way the world works, I guess, and the universe has evolved, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to look at this from a marketing perspective, because I think when you make those personal examples, eating too much sugar, sitting too much, people like this, these are things that are now part of the conversation where people are starting to understand why it's not good for you and the results of doing it. And it is this. And if you don't want this to happen, then we do different things. And it's interesting to me from a marketing perspective, because while the experience, quite honestly, is exactly the same, we do these things because they're easy, right? Someone told us to do it. We do it. I'm having this experience with LinkedIn that started yesterday, is that it seems now that there's someone out there who's teaching people to hack what is the latest version of the algorithm by sending their cold pitches to people through their like service request forms. So if you're set up as like a service provider, you have a service request form and people can fill it in. And now people are using that to pitch you. Well,
Yes.
we all know that that's not what that's for, but now someone told you that it's possible that you can use this without like being connected to the person and without sending a connection request message and getting around all the new requirements of a free account on LinkedIn. And so people are doing it because it's easy. But I deleted 2 of them. And I will delete
I hope you
all
blocked
of
them
the
and
other
marked them as spam as well.
right. Yes, I did. And this
Good.
is the thing that's like, I think people miss. I think that's the short-sightedness of it, right? You're like, this is tasty. I'm going to eat this sugary Kit Kat. And then instead of moving towards building authority, which is probably what you're trying to do if you're trying to build your business's reputation, what you're doing is you're actually going in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
You're creating this group of people who want to pretend you don't exist. And
I mean, sorry to interrupt you, but a lot of it comes down to empathy, right? So this is something Seth and I talked about quite a lot, empathy and generosity. So if you put yourself in the shoes of the person who's receiving that pitch, whether it's, hanging upside down from a chandelier or it's hidden in a form or whatever the hell it is, it's an interruption to that person's process, to whatever that person is doing. And it is trying to exploit a relationship that has been implied by LinkedIn, but doesn't really exist. And you haven't earned the right to make the pitch. So it doesn't matter that you got your pitch through the door. You're probably going to get marked as spam. And even if you don't, it's probably not going to work. So if your conversion rate, just looking at the numbers, let's get really, mercenary about this and say, well, if you look at just the numbers, what is your conversion rate going to be? 1 out of 1,000, 1 out of 100? Instead, if you use that same amount of time to try and start conversations with 5 people, maybe 10 people, try to understand what their situation is, took a genuine interest in them, and probably realized that maybe 1 or 2 out of those 5 people are never going to buy from you because they just don't have the money, or they're not a good prospect, or you can't help them. Maybe you'll end up with 2 clients instead of 99 spam complaints. And this is the same thing that applies to just about everything, email marketing, most other things. Sure, it's hard. Sure, we're all prone to greed, including people who are reading these pitches, and some proportion of us read that and think, oh, $1 million overnight. Yeah, even though I know intellectually it's not going to happen, there's a part of me that is greedy and that wants easy and quick. And so I'm going to click on that thing. But then in the end, I'm going to be disappointed anyway. I'm not going to get a good result. And in my mind, that person has not delivered on their promise. They've lost their authority, in my mind. And they're building a crappy brand.
Well, from a branding perspective, this is honestly one of the things that always confuses me. Hence why we're talking about it on the Crazy Stupid Marketing Show. Is that we do these things, but I don't think we think about them. We don't extrapolate them out to our desired effect. Because if we're talking about building authority, this is what am I here to do, right? What am I here to accomplish? And am I here to try and build a community of people who are going to go together to accomplish a thing? Am I trying to sell a product? Am I trying to sell a service? Am I trying to be a good human, right? There's lots of different reasons why people show up and build authority. So why am I here? And will this action take me closer to that or farther from that? And really just be The word that's coming to me is filtered. I was trying to pick a better word, but like to filter out the stuff that, again, our logic brain says no. Maybe our like gut says, "Ooh, that'd be great." Right? If I say this about authenticity all the time. It'd be great if authenticity was a thing you could just turn on like a light switch. Except it's not a thing you can just turn on like a light switch, because all of us have years and years of other people's expectations trying to convince us that to be who we're supposed to be. And it takes a minute to peel those away. And once
Yeah.
you get, this is why I come back to this kind of personal development component being a really solid core of this, is if you have the ability to do that from a personal perspective and say like, that's for me and that's not for me, and that might work for someone else but it's not for me, and you have that confidence to say that, then when it comes to marketing tactics in a world of anybody who can call themselves a marketing expert nowadays because they took a Facebook ads course, people who will say like, the thing you need, you have that ability to be like, but do I? And
Yeah.
that's the power in it, right? And again, when I look at people, like the people I see in the market who have put in the work to like build this authority, people who you're like, oh yeah, they say it. I mean, like Seth did, right? Like Seth said it. There's a lot of people who are like, oh well, Seth said that, so that is true.
Mm.
And also, he is very logical and reasonable in most of the things that he says, which are great. Which also, there's lots of people, I'm sure, who disagree with the things, but when you
Sure.
say the things and it aligns with someone's expectations or beliefs about the world, then you start to build your authority with those people. No one has authority amongst all people. It's not a thing. But you kind of have to own your position. So what would you say about that, Ash, in terms of like kind of, I don't know how to reframe it besides just like owning what you do and why you do it.
Um, for me, it's just about, I guess, following a path and being authentic to who I am and what I believe in. Um, each of us has had a different set of experiences. For me, I lost someone very close to me back in 2008, and that made me question everything, including my very meaningless job in the corporate world. I was working as an analyst, and I was being asked to do things I didn't agree with, and basically, I didn't want to be part of that crap anymore, and I then followed because so I lost. It was my first son that we lost. He was born premature, and he passed away an hour after he was born, in the very room where my wife, who happens to be a high risk obstetrician, had delivered probably 1,000 babies and saved a few hundred from dying, and that made me kind of question everything. But maybe that was the event that sort of kept me true to my path, because I haven't wavered from it over 15 years. And when I say my path, I don't mean necessarily just um, the when I say my path, I'm talking about my values and what is important to me. For me, it was that catharsis that maybe led to this deep change. Maybe if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have been as stubborn and as um, unwavering in my value set. So I guess to answer your question, well, what kept me on that path? It's probably to say that, oh, I'm disciplined and I'm this. I think that's BS, because I think we are all um, a lot more a product of our environment than most of us would like to admit. Evolution is not just within humans. Humans are a result, a product of the cosmos, and we're just a tiny little speck of, we think as humans we can control outcomes, but I'm getting a bit philosophical here, but the truth is we can control very little in the way of outcomes. But yeah, I think we can control values and things that we believe in and sort of stay true to them. So does that answer your question? I'm not even sure. I kind
Yeah.
of went
Ooh,
in 12
I
directions.
mean, yeah, this philosophical questions. You never know where they're gonna go. But I think this is really interesting what you say about how little we control in terms of the outcomes. So let's look at it this way, right? What if our desired outcome is in building authority? But at the end of the day, I don't control someone else's experience of me, right?
Hmm.
So I can
Right.
show up and I can have the intention or the desire to
Yes.
build authority, but I don't decide what you think of me. You decide
Right.
what you think of me. You have
Absolutely.
your filters, you have your value system, you have your
Absolutely.
beliefs. And so when we're looking at this from a building authority perspective, again, I think it comes back to like, I decide to be me and build authority within the people who kind of already believe those things. What are your thoughts on that? Because I think a lot of times marketing gets put into a bucket of things that convince people to believe things that they don't believe today. And personally, I think that is BS, since that's the phrase we're going
Mm.
to use for today. I don't convince you. Yeah, for example, for me, right? I help people and businesses build more authenticity into their marketing program. I don't decide that you want more authenticity in your marketing program. You decide that. And then you
Yeah.
go and you find somebody who can service that. I don't decide you need a new pair of shoes. You decide you need a new pair of shoes. And then you go to a person who sells shoes to get shoes. And so, from this perspective of like being yourself in a building authority perspective, I mean, my perspective is that you have to start there because then otherwise, who are you building authority with?
Right. And it is also unsustainable over the long term. I mean, there are lots of these marketing hacks, and I'm not saying they're bad or wrong, but they'll talk about finding a common enemy and all those sorts of things. And sure, I mean, if you have a common enemy, that definitely does help to draw draw a tribe to you, to build a movement around that. But as you say, it's not easy to control other people's thoughts and emotions in a large part because each person has had a unique set of experiences, has certain biases, and has developed certain filters and so on that they're probably not even aware of. So really, again, getting a bit philosophical here, we can only in some of the Eastern cultures, they say you can only control your actions. You have a right to your actions, but not to the fruit of your actions.
Mhm.
So I guess that's quite true. If I want to build authority, I can have an intention to do so, and I can do that in the right spirit and with the right intention. But I can't, unfortunately, control whether it actually works or not. Sure, I can keep testing and I can try and improve and so on and so forth. And I think Apple does that quite well. A lot of people would accuse them of just being profit taking, and sure, they have been, no question. But I still think they try to create products that uh, are aligned with their values. For example, having screen time on their devices doesn't really help their profit line. It's not going to benefit them, but that is something they presumably see is in the interest of the customer. Sure, they charge exorbitant prices, and since Tim Cook has taken over, it's just gotten it feels like highway robbery. Um, but yeah, I think their execution is very much built around their values and what they think the customer values.
Mhm.
And okay, so another thing I want to touch on in the authority space is I'm a big fan of Apple, not so much just the products. I think the products are good. They were much better. They're not as good now, but except for the Vision Pro. But I like how they've approached building authority and building the business. So one of the things that Jobs often said was, customers don't know what they want until you show it to them, and they don't really know what they want. On the face of it sounds quite arrogant, but he'd arrived at that position, I think, after years and years of soul searching, and there were 90 days from bankruptcy at one point and all that stuff. But if you look at something like, let's take the Vision Pro. I don't know if you're familiar with the product, but it's not new. And Apple is almost never interested in being first to market. They don't have an urgency, as Tim Cook recently said. We don't have an urgency to be first to market, but we do feel an urgency to be best in market. And I can't think of any product, maybe with the exception of the watch. Actually, that's not even totally original. Any of their products that were completely original, including the Mac, the mouse, everything. That was all, Xerox came up with that in their labs and whatever. But the execution of the product, I mean, I have, full disclosure, not used the Vision Pro yet. And I haven't used that Facebook, that Meta thing. But from what I have seen on videos, that Meta thing it was definitely one of the first to market, but it looks like a crappy user experience compared to Vision Pro. And Vision Pro isn't doing anything that different to Meta. But the little things, like, those screens that they've got, you can drag the screen and pull it and make it as big as you want. That's an example of something that I think a customer may not even know they wanted until they saw it. The idea that you can have as big a screen as you want. And by the way, for the record, this is not exactly good for mental health. And that's yet another conversation. But in terms of delivering something delightful to the customer, to be able to expand the screens, the execution is so masterfully done. Or that click, I haven't seen anybody else do this equivalent of a click. Have you seen the ads for the Vision Pro?
Yeah.
So the concept of doing this for a click and using your eyes as a mouse, that is something that is kind of something that a customer probably couldn't have articulated. But now that they've seen it, they've just gone, wow, that's just, it's an incredible user experience. To me, that is a great way to build authority.
Well, and it's even interesting in that I just finished reading this book, which is actually written, I think, in the mid 90s. So its description of technology was super interesting because the technology in the mid 90s was nowhere close to what we're experiencing right now. But there's people, I mean, yes, okay, characters in this book, but there's also people who are like this, right? People who would look at that and be terrified.
Yeah.
And there's people who would look at it and be like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Okay? Yeah. And so when you're thinking about this concept of building authority with those two groups of people, Apple doesn't build authority the same way. Okay.
Right.
You may build more fear with some people than other people, but they're choosing their people, and they're saying, this is how we want to do. We want to be best in market. We want to be the company that says, wow, they thought of that. That's genius, right?
Yeah.
Whereas some people will be terrified of that. And so
that's for good reason.
Yeah. I mean, I try not to think about it too hard because there's a lot.
It's scary. Yeah.
Of
Same thing with AI, right?
Can be used for, this was actually one of the funny lines in the book that I was reading, is they're like, all this stuff. And then the FBI agent is like, what if a bad guy gets it though?
Minority Report kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And so then you're like, but regardless of that, right? And regardless of if you're listening and you fall into one of those camps or you fall somewhere in between, which is probably where most people fall, there's a position, an ownership of that part of the market, that part of the experience that Apple has taken. And like you said, they're going to be the best in market, and they have their own definition of what best in market
Absolutely.
is.
Which a lot of
my
people
definition of
would
what
disagree with.
Best in market. I mean, I was trying to use my grandma's iPhone yesterday, and it was a huge disaster. Right? So everybody has their own experience. But that's precisely the point, is that Apple, I've actually used this as an example before because I had an iPhone for one phone cycle, and then I switched back I'm a Samsung Android
Right.
gal.
Sure.
And I am not. I'm not an Apple user. I don't have an Apple computer. I don't have an iWatch. I don't have any Apple anything. And they don't care.
No, they
Apple
don't.
doesn't care that I'm not an Apple user.
No.
Okay. And I think this is one of the downfalls that people experience in the arena of building authority, is that we try to build authority amongst all people, and it's not possible.
Yeah. So, Apple has never, some people would say it's arrogant, but they've never cared about people who are not their tribe. Like when they started, they were only trying to target the artists, and they even recruited people who were artists, and a lot of the engineers were poets on the side, and they were they were painters and stuff like that. So when they released that first Mac, they signed their names like an artist would on the motherboard or whatever that thing is that goes inside the Mac. They never tried to appeal to the masses, and ironically enough, that's what led to them appealing to the masses. I remember when I was talking to Seth about this, and I said to him, what's your advice to a starting entrepreneur? And he said, well, you can say two things. You can say, I've worked this hard, I've risked all this stuff, and so I've earned the right to steal attention, to lie, to cheat, and to trick people so I can make a quick buck. Or you can find the smallest possible audience and deliver a great result to them. So hopefully they'll tell their friends, and their friends will tell their friends. And that's how every great business is built. And so I said, okay, I'm going to challenge you on that. Describe Apple. How would you say Apple? He said. Then he went on to talk about Steve Wozniak, who I think is his friend, and he feels that Steve Wozniak was the brainchild, was the founding father of Apple. I think they both were, but the point is, they started with the smallest possible audience. There was this antenna gate problem at one point. Everyone was calling Apple out. This is when the phone had just come out, and Jobs released some awful song. I think, if you don't like it, don't buy it. It just sounded so lame. But he basically was like, if you don't like it, don't buy it. And we're not asking you to buy it. We're not forcing you to buy it. Return it. And they were giving people refunds. Apple is not for everybody, and neither is your product, and neither is Samsung, and neither is Facebook and Tesla and everything in between.
And this is like, I love how that ties into authenticity, because this is, if your product, service, what have you, is not going to be for everyone, then who is it for from an originating perspective, right? I feel like I've seen this happen a lot of times, honestly, especially with what I will call the mompreneurs, people who are trying to build their own business because they want to stay at home with their kids, but they need a dual income and all of these things. And they get sold the concept of being a virtual assistant or a variety of other things, which are quote unquote easy to do in the digital space, but they don't have any desire to help, like to solve that problem. Okay? They can. I always use this example, and I'm not sure why I came up, but like, I could shine shoes, totally capable of shining shoes. Right. I wouldn't want to choose to shine shoes. Although there's actually probably things I would probably rather shine shoes than like be a doctor, because I can't stand the sight of blood, but I could just have a conversation with people while I shine their shoes. So it's probably a better fit for me. But even in that example, there's a like personal fit that goes into that, right? That I am in this industry solving this problem because I care that there's a gap here. And I'm also not saying that not everyone who is a virtual assistant has a good reason for doing it. There's some people who, there's a lovely lady I met in the Southern US who loves organizing people's emails. And every time I talk to her, I'm like, this is the craziest thing to love, but you can tell she loves it so much. And I'm like, that's what you want. If you have a problem organizing your email, is you want someone who loves it to do it for you, not just someone to do it because they can do it. And these are the things when you have that, I use the French raison d'etre, right? Like the reason for being. And you use that as the foundation. and you show that to people, I believe that's the fastest route to your people, which then theoretically is the fastest route to building authority. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, if you can't solve a problem, you don't have a business. And even if you speak in terms of outside of a business context, I think human beings are problem solvers. And even, whether the payment is money, or the payment is social capital, or the payment is not being kicked out of the herd, we all human beings are called upon to solve a problem in some context. So that's the first thing I'd say. If you can't solve a problem, then of what use are you? And that sounds really harsh, but what I'm trying to get at is, we all have a purpose
Mhm.
in the world. And, I don't think I need to, I'm sure there's tons of studies that show that when people lose their purpose, their lives shorten. They do stupid stuff like, use drugs, or everyone has a need to fulfill a purpose. And this is one of the things that really concerns me about AI. Again, out of the scope of this conversation, but take my wife. If she but what I was going to also say is, we don't always feel drawn to this purpose, and we don't always feel passionate about shining shoes, or sorting emails, or doing cesarean sections, right? But if my wife showed up to work and said to a patient, "Oh, I don't really feel like it today. I've done bloody 3 cesarean sections, and I'm pretty tired, but I guess I'll just do it." You know, I don't think that patient's going to want her to operate on her, right?
I wouldn't.
Right, right. So you can't. It's not an option. I learned this from her. She said, being first of all, I learned from her that professionalism, or leadership, or whatever positive quality you want to call it, is not it's not a designation, it's an attitude,
Mm.
right? And it's also not a choice. You don't have the choice of saying, "Oh, I don't feel like operating today," or a pilot, getting in the plane, "Oh, I'm so tired. I don't feel like flying today, but I guess I got to get you guys there. So, there's 300 of you, and I guess I better not kill you people. So, yeah, I'll do it." How are you going to feel?
Mhm.
So, and I believe that you have to bring that same level of energy, and it's not easy. I'm not saying it's easy, but you got to bring that same level of energy and authenticity and commitment. What Seth told me is emotional labor.
Mm.
you know you've got to do the emotional labor, whether you feel like it or not. Once you've chosen your path, I'm not saying you can never pivot or never change, but if you're changing every second day, then, well, what are you gonna achieve?
Right. Well, and I think this is interesting because, like, as I shared with everyone earlier, I had a client thing blow up like right before this, and I'm like, okay, so we're gonna do that and switch immediately to this and figure it out as we go. Is that my ideal scenario before a show of this nature? Nope. It's absolutely not. Is it controllable by me? Nope.
But
Absolutely
you're
not.
doing the emotional labor to show up as best you can.
Well, and this is the thing is I think, and this is the thing from a authenticity perspective that I think a lot of people miss is it doesn't mean that you show up identically all the time,
No.
because there's stuff that's happening in your life and in your business and in other people's lives and in the room next to you, and kids are homesick from school and all of these things, and to pretend that that doesn't have an impact on what's happening in this instant is actually more inauthentic. Although I would say that that is the general societal process, is that we try to just like, that's business, that's personal, and this is work, and I gotta, this is my show, and this is my clients, and they got to be separated. And it's not, our brains don't work that way, folks. Our bodies don't work that way, more importantly, which is all these motions and feelings that we're having. Even if I try to push them down with my logic, they don't go anywhere. They're still there. And so
Authenticity is hard, Tracy.
it
It's
is hard.
hard work. It's a long game. And the best thing I think most of us can do is go towards what is difficult.
Mhm.
Find what is hard and do that first.
And this, again, when I come back to this concept of the easy button, and I do think I would actually challenge everyone who's listening to this to like look at in your life, where are you looking for the easy button? Where are you looking for
Yeah.
things that are faster, cheaper, easier? Right? And I'm not going to say that all of them are bad, but I
Not
use
all of
this
them are bad.
example on a podcast I was on this morning talking about how I hand chop nuts pretty much every day to go in oatmeal or granola or what have you. And I love to do it. It's fun for me. It makes me feel like a chef. It helps me practice my knife skills. There's like lots of benefits that I get from doing this. And my dad had said to me, "You need a slap chop." And I was like, well, a slap chop would make it faster. It would make it easier, but it would also take away all the pleasure I have from doing it. And when we look at our worlds, and we look at our digital experience, and we look at our cars, and we look at the fact now that we can communicate with the schools on apps, and like the bus system here has an app so they can let you know when it's running late, and like all of these things. And again, they're not all bad, but when you look at that and we notice that, oh, hey, we have kind of got into this habit of easy, faster, and where is that helpful and where is that not helpful?
So, Tracy, first of all, I just want to ask you, when you started doing this, chopping these nuts, you developed it as a skill, right?
Mhm.
It wasn't easy at the beginning. It was something that you developed. And the joy comes from the practice, the discipline, the skill. And if you stop doing it for a while, you would lose that skill. It would
Sure.
atrophy.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't say that that is easy. I think that that is easy now, but it wasn't always easy. Most things that are easy that don't require practice often, not always, as you say, involve a dopamine hijack. And
Mm.
cheap dopamine is one of the new, one of the recent drugs of this age. And it's a lot more toxic than most people realize. It comes many forms, and it has consequences.
Mhm. This is a really great point because I do like it. I do like it because there's a variety of things that I like cooking shows, and it makes me think I could actually compete on Chopped, which
Yeah.
there's no way I could ever compete on. But like it makes me feel like that, and it is because I practice, right? And I look at
Right.
my
So I wouldn't
chopping, and I
describe that
see
as
like,
cheap dopamine.
Mhm.
You see what I'm saying?
yeah,
Sorry.
it's earned. Right? It's
Right.
earned, just like building authority is
Yes.
earned. And when you earn it, this is also too. I think about I played basketball growing up, and we were city champs when I was in high school.
Wow.
And that doesn't happen just because you show up and you
Right.
put a basketball in someone's hand, right? It happens because you practice a
Yes.
lot. You build community a lot. I I I couldn't even tell you how many like fast break drills we ran to make sure that we were the team that could run a fast break better than any other team in the league. And we
Right.
did it, and we ran more than anybody else, which means we could outrun any team. That was my coach's strategy. We could outrun any team and we would win because we could still play full at the end and they couldn't because we outran them. And we had to earn that, right? You have to develop your lungs and your cardio in a way that, like, now if I tried to, my body would be like, what? But you earn that, you practice that. If you're going
Yeah.
to ride the Tour de France, right? Like, you don't just get up and ride for a month straight and be like, yeah, good, I'll be fine. No,
Yeah.
nobody does that. But I think a lot of times in the like sporting arena, again, our logic says like, well, yeah, you were never going to be an NBA basketball player if you never practice basketball skills. No, you have to practice them. You have to practice them consistently. You have to practice them a lot. And you have to, every player also has their own set of skills, right? Like some people are really good at 3-pointers. Some people are really good at passing. Some people are really good at rebounding. Not everybody is all good at the same thing. You figure out your thing, you practice it, and then you get good at it. And then people are like, oh my gosh, Steve Kerr,
And
number one, like free
and
throw.
by the way, that too can become an addiction. I mean, Michael Jordan tried to make how many comebacks, right, at the age of even 50, because he didn't know how to stop. And The Last Dance was an amazing show, but it doesn't. I don't know how the show ended, but I know that he tried to make comebacks later on because he didn't know what to do with himself. So it is important to be aware and realize that that too can be an addiction. I'm not. It sounds like everything can. Well, I suppose anything can become an addiction, but this is why self-awareness is important.
Mm-hmm. And it's actually interesting because I talked to this lady a while ago, and she works as a personal branding coach specifically for athletes who are trying to like Olympic athletes and things like that, who are trying to find their next thing because they can't be that forever because of our bodies and things like that. They're like, this is so interesting because, again, from an authenticity perspective, how much of our identity do we associate with one thing? Right? Then if we've built authority as one thing, it's still not who we fully are as a human.
Well, this is why I think practices like mindfulness and self-awareness are important, because your one thing evolves as you go through stages in life. It changes, and being aware of patterns is helpful. Journaling is a great practice. I hung out with Derek Sivers for a day when he was here in Australia. I don't know if you've heard of him, but he's one of the most amazing people I've met. And he journals for 4 hours a day, he said.
My hand would get tired.
Oh, he types, I think. I don't know that he actually writes, but whatever. You see what I'm saying, though.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, this is the thing, but I also think it's funny because my son, he's 5, and he's discovered the Nintendo Switch, which my husband plays a lot, and so is very good at most of the games. We have Mario Party. And my son tries to play some, and he's like, I can't figure out this game. And I'm like, well, Daddy wins the game because Daddy plays that a lot. Right? Not that I'm trying to encourage him to spend that much time playing video games, but the concept of that, like, you start off with an interest in it. So there's like some degree of frustration and, I'm not able to do this, but I want to be able to do this. Okay, well, now we have opened a door to the practice arena, right? Now we can practice in this arena. And the practice is actually easier because you're in an arena you want to play in. It's something because my background is marketing, and in marketing, everybody wants you to be a graphic designer. I'm terrible at graphic design. It is not a skill set of mine. And I remember my boss once asking me to like change the colors on this logo. And I was like, I mean, I can probably figure it out. Like, it's going to take me a while. And it took me a while, and I didn't enjoy doing it. And it's not a realm that I'm interested in being good at. So again, when we're talking about authenticity and building authority, I think it is important to look at like, what are the things that innately draw you towards them? I love reading, for example. And when power reading was a thing, I think like 20 years ago, I was like, oh my God, this would be amazing because I could read everything so much faster, although I read it fast as it is anyway. But like, it was innately intriguing to me because it was in line with something I'm already interested in. And so when you can look at yourself, look at your business, and get curious about what are the things that I am naturally intrigued by, and how do I use that as an input into my desired output of building authority, then we have some fuel that can very minimally, can't necessarily guarantee we're going to get to that destination, but it can fuel the efforts that go into going there.
Agreed.
Okay, well, friends, I know Ash said I have a hard stop, so I need to make sure we finish on time, and I'm going to respect that because I do think we could talk about this for a very long time. But Ash, if people are interested in learning more about building authority or specifically the services that you provide in that arena, where is the best place for them to find you?
So productiveinsights.com is my website.
You can see it on his hat
which,
if you're watching it live.
Yep, on my cap, productiveinsights.com. And if we have a membership program, so if you want help, you can go to productiveinsights.com/membership. The plans currently start for as little as $49 a month, go all the way up to $8.99, depending on what level of support you need from me. And we also have a podcast launch service. We have a full agency service. I'm an affiliate partner with HubSpot and Neil Patel and a whole bunch of other people, Amy Porterfield and so on. So just reach out to me on ash@productiveinsights.com and I'll get you hooked up.
Yeah, and as you can probably hear in that, there's lots of different ways that you can build authority. So make sure that you are committed to doing it your way. It's not just any way might not work for you. And I've seen a lot of people who go through that process and they're like, oh, but this is Amy Porterfield. It works for everybody. And it's a good methodology, right? HubSpot's great.
Amy Porterfield has been doing this for 12 years.
Yeah, there's some knowledge that goes into that. There's some stuff that works.
Well, it's also a lot of persistence and hard work.
Mm-hmm. And the building. I think this is the thing that we will end on for today is when we look at building authority or building anything, there's a building activity. So when you think about, I like to talk about mental calories, I level assess but emotional labor, right? These are efforts. There's effort that goes into doing this. There's no overnight successes, even if it might look that way. And let's remember to build, folks. Let's build. Let's not forget about the building and the activity that is associated with scoring all of those baskets. Ash, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So much great knowledge that you shared with us. I don't know if we just like blew everyone's minds so nobody was sharing anything in the comments, because I do see that there's some people watching. So thank you for those of you who are watching who don't know who you are because you didn't write anything in the comments. You still could, and then I would know who you are. But if not, all good. Thank you for joining us. There's big thumbs up happening here, Ash. So there's people who needed this today. And so hopefully everyone, this is something that can allow you to take what might be today crazy, stupid marketing efforts that aren't doing anything for your business and turn them into things that are going to be meaningful for your business. And connect with Ash, connect with myself if we're not already connected. Make sure, as we said, this is a building activity. Rome wasn't built in a day, as they say. So we got to build. We got to stay in the conversation. And so these are two great people to stay in the conversation with. Very minimally, stay in the conversation about building authority and what that looks like for you if your desired goal is to actually have some authority, at least with a small group of people at the end of the day. Thank you, everyone, for watching today. And until next time, permission to do you.
Thanks for watching, guys. And thanks for having me on, Tracy.
My pleasure, Ash. Thanks so much.
Bye.